what is common about all the people at FeelBeit, both the team and also the artists who choose to be with us, the audiences and the communities who choose to be with us, is that I think we all feel as if we're fighting for our home. We all understand that whether it be Jerusalem or whether it be the land more generally, that this is where we live, where we want to continue to live, and we want it to be a better place.
Our guests today are Riman Barakat and Karen Brunwasser, who are co-CEOs of FeelBeit, a groundbreaking cultural center that sits on Jerusalem's east-west boundary in which art is used to bridge Israeli-Palestinian divides. Riman is an East Jerusalem native who has worked on various peace-building initiatives throughout her professional career, and Karen is an American-Israeli social entrepreneur and activist. She's the co-founder of Mekudeshet, an award-winning arts organization that uses art and music to foster positive change from the heart of Jerusalem, an effort we will be discussing at length during this conversation. Riman, Karen, great to have you both with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks. So Riman, let's start with you. Can you tell us briefly about where you grew up, how you were raised, and what got you into this line of work?
So I grew up in East Jerusalem in the neighborhood of Beit Hanina, and I used to go to school to Spitz Girls College. I used to go to a school next to Damascus Gate, which meant that when I was 7 years old, that was like the very start of the first Intifada. And that really got me as a child to think about everything that was going on, and just imagine as a child how it could be different. And I talk a lot about my grandfather being that inspiration for how to see the other side. And that eventually got me to seeking bridges on the other side of the city.
Can you tell us about your grandfather? What did he do?
So he had a shop, it was one of the first shops at the entrance to Damascus Gate. And he sold all kinds of souvenirs, and he would often have Israeli vendors and retailers, and he'd be sitting around with them, like drinking tea. And sometimes I would be like, I'd finish school, I would walk over to his shop and like hang out. And that's what I would see. That was like my only memory of a normal human interaction of Israelis and Palestinians, which kind of like quickly got tainted by negative impressions and experiences.
And Karen, how about you?
I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and my parents, they like to say they made a very big mistake. They brought me to Israel when I was 16 for my brother's bar mitzvah. I fell in love with it, and especially with Jerusalem, and was not able to get it out of my system, and eventually wound up moving to Jerusalem and making Aliyah. But when I got to the city, it was in bad shape post Second Intifada. A lot of young, creative people leaving for other places that seemed to have better opportunities, less craziness. But I was really in love with the city. And I had an amazing opportunity to be part of creating an organization that became Mekudeshet and then became FeelBeit, the organization that Riman and I lead today. That's really, these are organizations that were about using the arts as a means of strengthening Jerusalem as a more vibrant, pluralistic place. And that's been my career for the last 20 years almost, arts in Jerusalem. And most recently, together with Riman, leading FeelBeit, our Israeli-Palestinian art center on the border between East and West Jerusalem.
So Riman, tell us a little bit about FeelBeit. First of all, what does it mean, and what goes on there? What kind of events do you organize?
In Arabic, it means just at home. And it's a polyglot of Arabic, Hebrew, and English. So feel is in English, And Beit and Bait is both Hebrew and Arabic, and our logo also is reflective of the two languages. It has the script of both Arabic and Hebrew at the same time, of the word Bait.
It's a beautiful 7,000 square foot venue that sits on the seam line between East and West Jerusalem, looking east, with beautiful panoramic views, a gorgeous terrace. And it's an arts venue for performing arts and visual arts, all disciplines.
And what goes on there?
What we do is we use arts to bring people together from both sides, to humanize across the divides, and also to imagine the kind of future that we'd like to be living. In other words, we use the arts as a means of prototyping the reality that we want to live in. And it's a professional arts organization. Some of the artists that we work with are very high profile with very major international careers. Others are emerging. And they both come and present or exhibit or perform at FeelBeit. And at the same time, we also invite artists to create together across the divide. So increasingly, FeelBeit is also a platform that allows Israelis and Palestinians to create original artistic works together. And then they're presented to audiences, of course.
You said that this has been going on for, I guess, a bit over a decade. Obviously, there have been some difficult times during that period, as there always are in this region. What happens when there's conflict? How do you manage to keep this thing going? Are people still open to meeting with people from the other side and getting involved in arts with people from the other side? Tell us about what's happened during some times of conflict, including perhaps the most recent Iran war.
Recently, we've developed this recipe. We call it the recipe of FeelBeit. People have been asking us, how have you been doing it? How did you manage through, especially those crisis times and post-October 7th? And one of the ingredients that I will specifically mention is trust built over time. And this has really proved key, because we didn't just like press a button and whoa, everything was great, and artists got together. Obviously, like everyone else, October 7th and following that war in Gaza was heart-wrenching for everybody, and different people from our organization and from our community lost different people on both sides. But there was this relationship that was built that was not easy to break, and we found ourselves initially gathering in very small groups of people over a lunch meal, and we did that week after week until we saw post-October 7th that our community was very much there, and we managed to continue and managed to open up. And artists, initially artists didn't want to do anything together, but eventually we invited artists when we felt it was the right time. And from since October 7th until now, we've had more than 300 artists, both Israeli and Palestinian, half in equal numbers.
It wasn't obvious to us post-October 7th that the organization would be able to continue. It wasn't something that was clear to anybody. And we're an organization that's been around, as you mentioned, for a while, and we've had our share of, upticks in tension, or this mini war, or this spate of attacks. And so we had, over the years, had to contend with smaller crises together as a team. And we built a muscle over time that I think prepared us for that very, very devastating moment that wound up lasting, for 2.5 years, and to a great extent is still going on. But I think what is common about all the people at FeelBeit, both the team and also the artists who choose to be with us, the audiences and the communities who choose to be with us, is that I think we all feel as if we're fighting for our home. We all understand that whether it be Jerusalem or whether it be the land more generally, that this is where we live, where we want to continue to live, and we want it to be a better place. And we, I think, realize that the only way it will be a better place is if we find a way together. That's the commonality. So on the one hand, there are people who, over the last 2.5 years, took a step back from FeelBeit or from this kind of Israeli-Palestinian partnership in general. But there are also many, many people from both sides for whom the work became more urgent. And so it's kind of counterintuitive, but actually, since October 7th, FeelBeit has only gotten stronger, both in terms of demand from audiences, in terms of the amount of artists that want to partner with us, in terms of just the general interest in us, both locally and international, and the interest in partnering with us. It's as if the desperation of this moment means that I think folks like us and others in the Israeli-Palestinian realm, people are turning to us, and we feel very grateful and humbled by that opportunity and by that responsibility.
You've both spoken about arts as a way to perhaps influence people and in some way address the conflict. Can you talk a little about how you see the power of the arts in affecting people's attitudes or bringing people together? How much of an impact can art really have on this conflict, given all the political, religious, historical issues that are on the table?
So first of all, we see art as a low barrier entry point. And so when we did start to reconvene after October 7th, we created this line of events called No Words, which really kind of like speaks to how the arts does not require one to be verbal, to be intellectual, and so getting people in the room to experience something together. And by the way, you meet Israelis and Palestinians, it already relaxes the tension. It has like that effect. And we had some incredibly emotional moments. And there were days particularly when it was incredibly difficult for Palestinians, and there were days that were incredibly difficult for Israelis. And I remember, on the one hand, there is one of our singers, her cousin, she's Palestinian, and she has a cousin from Gaza. And he died on that day that she was supposed to perform, and she got up anyway, and she performed, and and it was very much of a statement. It was a very powerful moment. On another occasion, just right after Hirsch's body was brought back, and also. Hirsch's family and cousins live quite around us. So we had an event that involved 3 cellists and an amazing violinist from the north. Like there were three Israeli women cellists and this incredible Palestinian musician. And they all played together, and everybody that was coming from the Shiva was convening, understood, and saw that there were a group of Israelis and Palestinians sitting together, and it felt like an incredibly powerful prayer, joined by this moment of compassion and understanding that we are all in it together, and we are all experiencing this common loss. We got to a point where it's not right and wrong. It's human beings being lost every day.
The arts work on the emotional and the psychological barriers to meeting one another, to understanding one another, that I think rational conversation, talking points or dialogue and debate they can't really get to. There are so many defenses that we have as Israelis and Palestinians for obvious reasons. I mean, we often say that to be afraid in this land, to be angry, to be distrustful, these are understandable feelings and legitimate. So when people are going through such trauma, the arts sometimes are that very, very supple power that allow you to to take a step forward. And from, I think, if you look at many conflicts around the world that have been resolved, oftentimes the arts played a role. You're an American, like, and you think of the civil rights movement. You think of the 1960s. You can hear a soundtrack. Music was part of the movement. It was part of the change that happened in the United States, for example. And we think art can play that role here as well. And so we we feel this incredible privilege to be able to work with artists who can not just use their art as a common denominator or bring people together, but who have the privilege of imagination, to imagine what could be here, right? Right now, I think it's very, very hard, with all that's happened, for people to even imagine something better. They're almost afraid to have hope, afraid to imagine. Artists imagine, um, when they wake up in the morning. That's what they do, and then they create based on that imagination, and it manifests itself in actual life. So FeelBeit in many ways is like this manifestation of imagination for what could be, that winds up being part of a reality on a small scale that we hope will get to a bigger scale and inspire others. We've had about 35,000 people at FeelBeit in comparable numbers, Israelis and Palestinians, over the last 2.5 years, which is, not a small number, particularly considering how crazy everything has been. And what's really, really interesting is that, the demand only grows. When the problem isn't that, there isn't a demand, it's that people don't know that there's a possibility. And when you make something possible, and when you create, like Riman said, a low barrier entry point, which is what the arts can do, a low barrier entry point into shared space, and people see it's an opportunity, they see that it's possible, then a lot more people than you would expect are willing to walk through the door.
It's a space where you don't have to sort of defend who you are. So Palestinians walk in as Palestinians, Israelis walk in as Israelis, and they don't have to apologize for it. So the conditions are there and are such that it's accepting and inviting of everybody to be who they are, without having to carry the burden of a flag all the time.
Now, I mean, the fact is that FeelBeit is in Jerusalem, which is an incredible city, but it's also one of the most fraught issues in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. How does that fact affect your success, affect what you're able to do, affect the people who come to your events? Is it a factor?
It's huge. Jerusalem is one of the most important values of the organization. Our team is a half Israeli, half Palestinian team. Almost everybody is from Jerusalem. And in many ways, the organization itself is sort of an homage to the city. It's an act of love for the city that we want to live in, and also realize has incredible challenges. And we like to say that Jerusalem keeps us real. Jerusalemites don't live in theory. You live with very high resolution diversity all the time. You can live in a bubble, perhaps in Jerusalem, if you stay within a couple of blocks, but very quickly that bubble will burst if you walk, half a kilometer. And so Jerusalemites are not purists. They have to make their way with all sorts of idiosyncrasies, all sorts of things that don't completely make sense, all sorts of things that at a theoretical level shouldn't work, but somehow in reality have no choice but to work. And I think that Jerusalem pragmatism, is a big part of why we succeed in FeelBeit, because it's real. We're actually looking at our city, at our home, and asking, what does the city need? What do our communities need? What do we need as individuals in order to stay here, in order to make things better? And Jerusalem is also endlessly inspiring. I mean, it has lots of things that are scary and disturbing, but it's also a city that if you open your heart to it, there is tremendous sort of human story there that for artists and for audiences is endlessly fascinating and endlessly inspiring.
Speaking of unlikely partners, maybe let's talk about the two of you. You come from different communities. Some people would find it unusual that you're able to work together, to start something together. How did that happen, and what's it like working with someone from the other side, as many people would see it?
So the most important thing that I think we wanted very consciously to happen for the leadership of FeelBeit as a prototype is an equal partnership. Even though that the conditions, I don't have the same rights and papers as Karen, but we wanted this space, within this space, for us to have that kind of equal partnership, but also equal responsibility, and that's key. And that makes this partnership incredibly unique. We're driven by this love for Jerusalem, which is also a love for the land, because we feel that, again, talking about Jerusalem, it has all those complex elements of everything else. It has the religious, non-religious, the Palestinian, the Israeli, like all of those things. We also connected through this pain of not wanting Jerusalem to be torn. And I think that's something that Karen and I share very strongly in how we see our role and our mission in creating this new culture at FeelBeit.
Riman and I, we met against the backdrop of the 2014 war, which at the time seemed like a really big war and now seems like a skirmish compared to what we've been through the last 2.5 years. But, you know, we in our organization had been trying to build bridges across the divide. At the time, we were a completely Israeli organization. We were trying to reach out to East Jerusalem, to Palestinians. And we had made some progress. And then that war broke out and sort of everything fell apart. And a lot of people, you know, on both sides were not interested in talking at that moment, or it was too scary for them or too risky for them. But we kept looking. And interestingly, Riman was in a similar situation, not in the arts, but in sort of the proper kind of track to diplomacy, peace building world, and also was still looking, especially in the midst of the 2014 war. And we were looking and she was looking. And that's where it started. In other words, it started by, I think, with people that were not easily deterred, even when stuff got tough. So that's the starting point. And then we've been working together for over a decade at this point. And so it's, like Riman said earlier, it's trust built over time. And again, it's like we both have a lot of love for our identities, for the communities that we come from, whether as a Jewish Israeli or a Palestinian Muslim. We also are very much human beings, and we're women who also connect very much at that level.
And speaking of the personal aspects here, have you experienced any kind of significant blowback to the work you're doing, whether professionally or socially? What kind of response have you gotten from your own communities, families, friends, colleagues, and so on? The fact that you're working together during times that have been very difficult.
So post October 7th, so people in my family, so for example, my nephew got beaten up by the police in East Jerusalem the first week of the war. And my sister, who was a regular at FeelBeit, stopped coming to FeelBeit. But I knew she would come back. And I knew, so with everything that was going on, she was also asking about the people that she knows at FeelBeit, and she was asking about my colleagues, and she's asking about what they think about the war and what's happening in Gaza. And a lot of her questions had to do with the need to be seen. And I think each of the different communities wanted their pain to be seen in those difficult and incredibly traumatic moments. And so those are the kinds of questions that I had from my family. We had also friends and family that got killed in Gaza. But somehow my family never told me to stop doing the work that I do. And eventually the proof is that, you know, friends and family, you know, kept coming to FeelBeit or came back to FeelBeit, depending who. And so we are in a moment today that we have a strong and growing community of Palestinians and Israelis that also have built this trust over time, and they treat FeelBeit as a refuge, as a space of sanity that perhaps doesn't exist in a lot of places.
There are certainly people who I meet or in my circles who, after October 7th in particular, in sort of the beginning of the war, were asking me, how can you go back there? How can you do this work? Haven't you lost faith? I got that a lot. I just have this kind of treasure trove of personal stories that I can share with people that help them to understand that my connection to Riman and to everybody else at FeelBeit is a very deep and real one that they should maybe use as an example to reconsider that position. So, you know, for example, when on October 7th, there were several people from our broader FeelBeit community, artists, audiences, connections, who had lost family on October 7th, including folks that are the Palestinian side of the organization knew. One of them was Maoz Yinon, who's since become a very big peace activist. Maoz lost his parents and many people that he grew up with on October 7th. And by chance, Maoz had hosted all of our FeelBeit team in Nazareth in September of 2023, a month before, because we were looking to do a sort of a cultural tourism partnership. And we were scheduled to host Maoz on October 9th. And the plans were already sort of, everything was set up and ready for him to come to Jerusalem. We were going to take him around. One of our colleagues, whose name is Zudi, who directs communications for us, immediately in the days after October 7th, we had a call of senior staff, and he said, you know, I don't know how I'm going to straddle the gap between these two worlds. And he was kind of distraught and not knowing how he could go on. And then a couple of days later, he made the very, very brave choice to go to the Shiv'ah for Maoz Yinon's parents who were killed on Netiv HaSara. And it was such an incredibly moving step from my perspective, that because to be a Palestinian from East Jerusalem, going to the Shiv'ah of a Jewish family that the parents have been killed on October 7th, he didn't know how he would be received. He didn't know if he would be welcomed. He didn't know if he would be shouted out of there. He walked in and he was welcomed, and Maoz gave him a huge hug and said, we're going to bring the peace, you know. But I was so, that's Maoz is an amazing guy. But I was so moved by that step that he took. And later, when Hirsch Goldberg Pollin's body was returned and there was the funeral, Riman came to me and said, I'm going to come with you to stand at the funeral procession. Hirsch is from Jerusalem, and he was a very sort of, he and his family, were very much penetrated the hearts and minds of Jerusalemites. Riman, she knew I was going to go to the funeral procession, and she said, I'm going to come with you, which was, again, it blew me away. And she reminded me that in 2014, when a Palestinian teenager called Mohammed Abu Khdir was murdered brutally and actually burnt alive by Jews that I went to the mourner's tent. These are different stories that we can sort of share with people who ask questions or are suspicious, to help them understand that we have deep relationships. We have built something together over the course of many, many, many years. We have a shared baby, which is FeelBeit. We've really built something together, and we've stood up to naysayers on both sides publicly. And so when you're able to talk about people in not theoretical ways, but in very concrete, personal ways that reveal something about the steps that they were willing to take to keep this connection going, then it a lot of times makes people think a little bit differently. It opens them up a bit. And I think over time, pretty much everybody that was close to me who didn't want to come to FeelBeit in the beginning has come back again. But again, I think we said this before, we believe in compassion over self-righteousness, over righteous indignation in general as a policy at FeelBeit. And we do have compassion for people who are scared, who aren't sure, who for whom it's not obvious. We don't X those people out ever. We try to stay open and encouraging and warm and welcoming, hoping that eventually they'll step in the door.
We don't call FeelBeit a political project, but I think this partnership is very much prototyping what leadership together could be like, what living together could be like, taking decisions together. What are the compromises? What are the important things that that you hold on to, that you can't let go of? What are the things that you're willing to let go of? Jerusalem is also this kind of playground that brings all those issues, very close to us, in order to, we're confronted by all those questions. We admit that we're figuring things out. We don't have all the answers.
Like Riman said, we both started in political science, international relations, Middle Eastern studies, thinking that that was the way. We both had careers in those areas and lost faith. And I feel like I lost faith because at a certain point, I came to believe that politics is downstream of culture. There's that axiom that politics is downstream of culture. And we think that if you can affect culture, then you can affect the politics. And that's where we see our role, as using the arts to show a different kind of Israeli-Palestinian creative partnership. From our perspective, there are also, rather than political prescriptions, there really are kinds of methodologies or values that we find really work well for us. So, Riman talked about equal partnership, which is critical. We talked about having a shared home. We talked about Jerusalem. We talked about the power of the arts. But, and there's a few other elements to us that are really essential. One of them is this idea that we have to balance self-love and self-critique as Israelis and Palestinians. We think that that's super important. We know that if we don't practice self-love, not only as Karen and Riman, but as Israelis and Palestinians, then we will have very little ability to influence our societies. They won't see us as belonging to them. And we genuinely have love for them too. And at the same time, we have to be self-reflective and self-critical. And so, like any healthy human being, that's kind of how FeelBeit operates. And I'll say another thing that we talk about a lot. We are not looking merely to stop hating each other or to stop fearing each other or to stop killing each other. That is obviously a precondition for what we really want to do, though, which is we think that we actually have what to gain from one another. We believe that there is a new culture that can emerge in this land that is, let's say, draws on its parts and creates a sum that is really, really exciting and different and new. We think Israelis and Palestinians can create something extraordinary together here. That's what the art is meant to showcase. And really, when you take Israeli musicians with their styles and traditions, and you put Palestinian musicians with their styles and traditions, you put them together on a stage, sometimes, sparks will just fly and you'll hear something that you've never heard before. You'll hear a sound that is reminiscent of other things, but it's something new entirely. And we do that with music. We do it with all different kinds of arts. That's what we're aiming for. We are actually currently in the midst of a very exciting project that is made possible by Expertise France, which is a subsidiary of the European Union. Because we've been doing so much co-creation between Israeli and Palestinian artists, they supported the creation of an Israeli-Palestinian artistic collab. And right now we have dozens of artists from both sides, all different disciplines, who are entering into creative processes of several months. And there will be over 16 original artistic productions, shows, an exhibition that will be premiering in our summer festival, which goes from July 27th through August 15th. And it's going to be a festival that is entirely comprised of Israeli-Palestinian co-created artistic works and productions and performances. So it's something we're very excited about, and we would love to have people join us sort of as an opportunity to experience what can be.
Absolutely.
Okay, this was great. Thanks, Karen and Riman, for joining us today. Is there anything either of you would like to add before we wrap this up?
No, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope more people get to visit FeelBeit, and that more and more artists come together.
And thank you to you all for doing this. It's really, really important, because I'm sure you hear this kind of stuff too, because you're involved in the work. When we go out in the world, or when we go out in the country and we talk about what we're doing, people are so stunned that it's even possible, and there's many, many more people like us than folks realize. And so the fact that you're giving a stage to this kind of stuff, it's so important for people's morale and for their faith that something else can happen. It's just incredibly critical. So thank you so much for doing this.